And then if you think about what we just discussed, like all these autonomous machines trading with each other and paying each other and creating value and exchanging data and information and having this vibrant economy, like if even two machines within the same conglomerates can't trade with each other, then obviously the entire vision of the machine economy is obsolete. Like, so basically what you need is you need an harmonization layer and you need an infrastructure that enables a machine to do business. And that is what we build.
Wow. Martin is the Chief Business Officer at EoT Labs, the team behind peaq, which is the leading Layer 1 blockchain specifically built to power the machine economy. From news reporting at one of Germany's largest broadcasters and consulting conflicts in Yemen to managing a €40 million fund for Web3 investments, Martin has a very colourful background. He is now building the infrastructure for the machine economy while simultaneously issuing a haunting personal warning about the impeding displacement of human labour, which is driven by AI. So welcome to Dealflow Podcast, Martin.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
It's going to be a good one. And I want to just jump into the conversation that we were having a minute ago. You said it is just crazy business as usual at peaq Network. So what is going on at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're following, right? Like Figure is running this live experiment, right? For a packaging humanoid competing with one of their interns. And I think that is telling you everything about where we are headed. As a species, we are basically creating our own. Some would say our own descendants. I don't know if I'm agreeing with that or not, but we're definitely creating a new labor force that is in some cases superior. And obviously, us having worked on the machine economy, having worked on autonomous machines, and on that idea of hopefully sometimes contributing to distributing the abundance that this machine economy can create. This is obviously a pivotal time. And so there is a lot that is happening in terms of tech, in terms of product development, in terms of partnerships, and very, very exciting times. But of course, at the same time also, disruptive times that we're in.
Very disruptive. I want to unpack that a little bit because I actually don't know this experiment. But so Figure AI is one of the biggest humanoid robotic companies out there. And are they at the moment running an experiment where humanoids are competing with a human intern? Because I think it was on X, there was a humanoid who was handling packaging and flipping them over. I did see that, but I didn't realize it's actually a competition to compare them against humans. Is that what's going on at the moment?
I don't know if it's designed as a competition or if that's the intention. You know, I can't say that this is the case, but definitely they are comparing the performance, right? And so at the end of the day, it is a competition. It's a test. It's a pilot. Polymarket has their bets ongoing. How long will this robot be able to conduct its task without any errors, right? So, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Like I think 2 to 3 years ago, we all were believing to a degree that this future is very far away, and I still think with regards to humanoids, it is fairly far away. But with fairly far away, I mean 5 years and not 50. And that itself is crazy. Yeah.
I agree. It's getting closer and closer. I used to project forecast humanoids 10 years out in the future, and actually having one physically in my own house kind of gives me a little bit of a goosebumps feeling. But honestly, I think it's getting more likely that they're going to be operating in humans' houses a lot quicker than we're actually expecting, considering the massive rapid development that we're continuously seeing. It really does blow my mind. So for the listeners, I want you to unpack at a sort of zoom out a little bit and explain what exactly is the machine economy for nobody that has ever heard of it before.
Yeah, sure. So basically, our entire system, right? The entire kind of story arc of our species is that economic activity has evolved around us, right? So basically, when we kind of became actual sentient beings, through our own evolution, we basically started creating nation states and then companies and businesses, and we started trading, and we started producing goods and services, and we started selling them to each other, and we started building what we call an economy, right? And the entire global economic activity is generated by our species, right? It's the physical labor that we conduct. It's the white collar labor that is being conducted, the services that we are providing. And so far, every time we had a technological revolution, what happened is that we had efficiency increases in the way we are creating economic output, with the emphasis on we, right? We humans creating economic. That happened when the wheel was invented. That happened when the press was invented. That happened when we got the first automation of factories in the early 20th century or the mid 19th century. That happened when we automated financial markets. But it's always us automating or improving, using technology as a tool to improve things, right? Now, we are seeing, for a long time, we've been seeing like the machine economy evolving in its like early kind of iterations, right? You had semi-autonomous machines running in factories for a very long time. You have huge companies like ABB, like KUKA, that are known for the robots that they are producing, and these robots are obviously being applied everywhere, from car manufacturing to any kind of industrial applications. But still, they were tools, right? And they were not autonomous economic actors, right? And the machine economy takes this entire iteration one step further and is kind of a tipping point in the history of humanity, because the machine economy, as we understand it, is an economy where you will not have humans in the loop to conduct these things. The machine will autonomously do the labor. It will autonomously create value. It will probably even decide autonomously what it's going to do, right? And what that means is that we are entering a world that is orders of magnitude more wealthy, orders of magnitude more efficient, orders of magnitude more automated. And that can end up in two different scenarios, right? The first scenario is that it creates a situation where the very, very few that own the companies that are creating the economic value are centralizing wealth and power, which is the likely outcome. Actually, there's three scenarios. Let's put that as the first scenario. The second scenario is that, also, in my own personal opinion, not completely unlikely, that this new intelligence is not obeying to any species, right? And creates an entirely new system where we don't know what that means, but where you will see basically like in Star Wars, like these autonomous machines walking around, following pursuing their own interests. And the third iteration is that we are leveraging that technology and that explosion in economic activity and wealth to kind of nurture an age of abundance where we're kind of closing the poverty gaps that we have globally, where these machines are doing all the work that we as humans don't want to do, where we see an explosion in creativity because and also in empathy, because people now have the time and the resources to focus on these things. And these are the three of the many different scenarios for the machine economy, but high level, I would say three of them, the like most logical ones. And we've been working towards facilitating the machine economy, right? Because there's things that still need to be done in order to make it work in practice, and then hopefully to contribute to it being the third scenario, which is the human-centric one.
That's what I was just about to ask you. Out of these three scenarios where the machines take control, the ultra wealthy take control, or the abundance is distributed amongst all of humanity, which one is peaq advocating for? It's number 3, right?
I mean, it would be weird if it was anything else, right? But yes, of course, right? That is the idea. And it's a long journey, and of course, like we can only contribute our own like small part to it. But of course, that is the vision that we have, and it is also explains to a degree why blockchain, why Web3, because it kind of goes also to the fundamental ethos of what this technology actually is about, right? And of course, it needs to be merit based. It needs to be a system that also has economic incentives, and that also makes sense and is sustainable and viable. Because before you get to the point where you can actually contribute to that future, it needs to you need to be in a position to be able to do so. But of course, the human-centric route is what we are advocating for. We've seen that when we started onboarding the first DePIN networks, which I think is a great example for this democratization, right? And not only that, right? It's not only decentralized to democratize; it's also decentralized to make things work that in a centralized environment just don't work. I think that's also important. There needs to be a clear business case behind that; otherwise, it doesn't make sense. But of course, we are actively rooting for scenario 3 in that case.
So, why is it important that AI is built on blockchain?
If it's built on blockchain, I mean, not everything will be built on blockchain, and I think that's good. And that's also logical, right? I think there's different cases and arguments to be made for blockchain and AI at that intersection, specifically in the context of the machine economy, and that is kind of the root idea of peaq, right? You need an open system, right? You need an open system because otherwise, technically, the things don't work. So we actually discovered that 7 years ago when we kind of started out in that entire realm of the economy of things, as we used to call it, where we worked with companies like the Volkswagen Group, DMG Mori, Vodafone. The Volkswagen example was a very striking one. Audi back in the days was the partner that we worked with, and that was a simple case on decentralized charging, right? Where basically a car from Volkswagen was not able to charge at from Audi was not able to charge at a Porsche charging station, and then kind of autonomously pay the charging station and settle the transaction and settle the entire session. And that despite the fact that both machines, the car and the charging station, are part of the same conglomerate, right? Part of the same group. And then if you think about what we just discussed, like all these autonomous machines trading with each other and paying each other and creating value and exchanging data and information and having this vibrant economy, like if even two machines within the same conglomerates can't trade with each other, then obviously the entire vision of the machine economy is obsolete. So basically what you need is you need a harmonization layer, and you need an infrastructure that enables a machine to do business. And that is what we built. So we built the standards, which is the passports, the identities, right? We like to call it passports because the machine needs to be able to travel between different environments. We have the wallets, which is equivalent to our wallets as humans, right? It's a similar thing. And then, of course, it needs rules and access, right? So you need to be able to define what is a machine allowed to do economically, what isn't. And then the core component, and this is what it all boils down to at the end of the day, is economic trust, and the mechanism to enable that. And to answer your question, why does AI, or in that case, physical AI, need to run on Web3 or on blockchain? To me, really, the answer is that there is no real open source alternative that is able to create the incentives for people to participate in such an interconnected system, and B, there is no other harmonization layer. And that is also why we've been starting working on this obviously already last year, but then this year also publicly came out with our kind of omni-chain evolution, because you cannot limit it to one chain. You will see different types of applications, services, but also machines running on different chains. And for us, the way we put it is, of course, the home of the machine is peaq, but it can travel. It can travel everywhere, and it needs to be able to create value everywhere and for everyone. And that's the first thing. And then the second thing, really is provenance, right? I think that's something that's not necessarily directly tied to the machine economy, even though indirectly it might be the case. But I think provenance is something that we haven't solved yet fully, right? We in Web3 we said provenance is one of the reasons why like some of the stronger community projects succeed, right? Because it's the only way to have to like Web3 is the only way to have provenance in culture and in content, right? I think it's even more important when you think about AI generated content, right? What is actually real? What is not real? How do you track it? How do you tie it to the creator? How do you make sure that the creator is the one that is being rewarded? I don't think that we have fully figured it out yet. Like specifically, and that's one thing that I saw back then when I was at Bertelsmann before I kind of built this Web3 hub and supported the team to build that fund. I was obviously also involved with some of the divisions, and still I think that hasn't changed since I left. The big question is how do we ensure provenance over our content? How do we, and that is really where I see the second iteration for this. And then the third one is again incentives, right? Like back then we said like 4 or 5 years ago, we said crypto is actually an HR revolution because it's like a talent revolution because it provides incentives for people to contribute. And then if you do something meaningful, you get rewarded, right? Because it's an open source system where rewards and monetary reward, like economic rewards, are being distributed. I mean, you see that this works with DePIN, right? I think there's still a very, very small number of DePINs that has proven the model fully, right? Simply because sometimes the economic incentives just don't match the actual economic value of the data or of the services that you're decentralizing. But without a doubt, if you just think about the very simple case of compute, right? Like if you want to meet the global demand, then you need to tap into the idle resources that we have. And that is true for data, that is true for bandwidth, that is true for so many things. And that, I think, the third example on why Web3 actually matters for AI, because it provides the coordination mechanism for people to provide the resources needed in order to run that huge machinery.
And without this global coordination of this micro participants in an economy like this, is it just not going to be possible? And then does the power tip across into the likes of Microsoft or Amazon, the tech giants, and then these small players are the ones that are conducting the whole entire AI or robotic economy moving forward. And these systems are actually closed, so they're training their AIs or robots or cars or whatever they might be on their own values, on their own data, and orchestrating that outcome. So what you're kind of saying there is we shouldn't be leaving the fate of humanity up to these tech giants. Instead, it's decentralizing it and dispersing the power so there can't be a trump card play, right?
I mean, in the perfect scenario, exactly, right? Like in an ideal world, that is exactly the case. There will be, I mean, that there will be, I've seen things over the last couple of weeks and dived quite deeply into the robotics world, right? And like met with founders that have nothing to do with crypto, that are very deep in the industry. And of course, there's many people that start working also on these types of things outside of Web3, right? To have governance mechanisms for robots to make sure, and that's part of also what we try to do to make sure that we can differentiate between a good and a bad machine or a good and a bad robot, not only in economic terms, but that is further down the line. I think in the mid and short term, it's just to enable all of these different machines to actually coordinate and communicate with one another. And there is reasons, for example, right, why many of these machines enable or run, enable the ROS2 environment, for example, an open environment where developers can jump in, build, like the reason why many of these robots, some of the biggest brands in robotics are actually fully compatible with peaq OS is because there is an open source standard that has nothing to do with crypto, right? It's just an open source standard that you can plug into. Not every machine supports it. Not every robot supports it. But the fact that there is this opportunity and that this is part of the way these robots or many of these robots can be operated gives me a lot of hope that these robotics companies understand that they will depend on kind of a global network of talent, right, in order to continuously develop these machines. And then B, this is the way for us to be able to actually make these machines coordinate and communicate and collaborate with each other. And my hope is that the more I don't see a future. I hope I'm right. I might be wrong, but I don't see a future where this is a winner takes all market.
Mm.
I don't see that. And so the fact that they are all trying to collaborate and enabling an environment for people to build software that enables that coordination, that makes me quite optimistic, because then you force also global coordination. You force the UK to be able to collaborate with like an Asian robotic company to be composable with a American or European company. And I think geopolitically, I don't think that this is the intention, but geopolitically, this can be down the line. This could be a very, very valuable element of how things are shaping up.
I want to ask the question back on that. So, global coordination has not been possible in humanity just because of power struggles between different jurisdictions, and a lot of religion is playing into that as well. Some countries have different beliefs that don't fit well with other religions, and this is why a lot of conflicts have happened around the world. So, how do you actually see robotics coming forward in the future to actually create a global decision that everybody is okay with? Like, who decides what religion is better than the other religion, or what is good versus bad in the robotic economy?
Wow, that's a really good question, and I'm so sorry, but I don't have an answer. Like I think right now we are also in a very foggy type of situation, right? I mean, if you look also into like behind the curtains of who's like involved in some of the biggest robotics companies, right? It's pension funds, state backed
Mm,
entities, right? I think there is no doubt that even the dancing humanoids that we see from the different types of manufacturers, at the end of the day, there's a lot of military backing behind it, and there is also, it's very clear that these things are not like they are that they are not used for entertainment purposes, right? Like I think it's very clear that that these machines and these robots have a wide array of utility, and lots of different ways to be applied, from working in hazardous environments that we don't or cannot work in, from doing, as we see in that case where you have this intern standing there for 8 hours straight, like sorting packages, which yes is not necessarily the most intellectually stimulating, but
mm,
that's not all, right? I mean, we know that these robots can be and are trained for combat environments, and so I don't know where this is going. I have no answer. I think nobody knows. I just have the hope that we're kind of reaching a point where um, the value proposition of using them in a value creating environment rather than in kind of strengthening or hardening the global tensions outweigh the military purpose. I have honestly no idea on where this is going. I think we're seeing different types of geographies applying different positions right now. I think, at least in my lifetime, I've never seen the world that polarized, right? Um, it's very, very hard to tell. But if you look at global history, and if you look at how geopolitics have developed over the last centuries and decades, we've been in similar situations before, and we somehow managed to figure it out. I really hope that this is going to be the case this time as well.
I hope so too. So that was a question around the builders and the trainers of the AI and robots in this space. What happens when we flip that narrative when it's the AI and the robots against the humans? So, to dive a little bit further into that, I read a little bit of your writings online, and it was talking about how if we forecast into the future, AI is actually kind of in a long game at the moment. They're playing us, and they're waiting for humanity to build the infrastructure that they need to be able to autonomously conduct business without humans. And then humans actually become a resource that is just not needed anymore. And then the narrative flips. The AI and the humanoids that are operating autonomously on blockchain turn against humanity because they've got the data centers, they don't need the miners anymore, they're autonomous.
Hmm.
Like, what does that look like?
I'm flattered that you actually read this this huge paper that I wrote that a couple of weeks ago actually. Maybe for context, right? So it's a question that I've asked myself, or I've been asking myself for a very long time, right? I mean, obviously, when you're working it's very, I wouldn't say at the cutting edge of these technologies. I think the researchers and the people behind, and like at Anthropic and Microsoft, they obviously have even much deeper insights, probably, or even within the robotics companies themselves, right? But obviously, when you're thinking so much about this 24/7, and when you have kids, then you ask yourself, okay, like what is the actual worst case scenario? And one thing I want to make very clear, what I described in the scenario that you just laid out, which is the one that I'm focusing on in this paper, that I think I called it the last generation or something, is a very dark scenario. It's a very, very dark scenario. And so what is the underlying assumption here, right? So the underlying assumption is derived from the Maslow pyramid of human needs. For those of you who don't know, and that's, I need to give also credit where credit is due. This is also something that Kerstin Eismann, who's a dear colleague of mine, she has kind of come up with this concept of the Maslow pyramid of machine needs long time ago. I think almost 10 years ago, when she's been one of the European pioneers of the machine economy actually back then, or still, but she was talking about that stuff long before I cared about anything beyond Champions League football. And so basically, my assumption is that, like, we basically, when we meet our most basic needs as humans, right? We obviously climb up, or like kind of excel in that pyramid, up to the point where you reach where probably the majority of people are right now, which is first economic maximization, and then of course spiritual maximization. But I think most people are actually in the economic maximization category still, right? And our entire systems are built on economic maximization, right? Make as much money as possible, be as profitable as possible, increase your revenue, grow your business, This is what the entire global economy is based on. That is why we always say we need to have X% of global economic growth per year, right? And that's a model that is good, and I believe is good, and I believe is also healthy. But to assume that a machine would follow the same patterns would probably be a bit naive, because some of the components that drive our decision making as humans are very human specific, like ego, right? Like
robots don't have ego, or AI doesn't have ego?
I don't know, but if you break it down to like the most basic thing, what is AI right now, right? It's all about efficiency. And then that is the thing. It's all about efficiency. And then there's another thing that every species so far has in common. And we are assuming here that we're creating a new species. That's also like, it's an assumption that I make. Doesn't mean that that's the case, right? But if AI is a species, then the primary goal for every species, and that includes AI, is survival, right? That's true for animals. That's true for humans, right? That's any being thrives to survive. Basically, that's the most fundamental goal. And survival for an AI probably means different things than it means for humans, right? So for us, for example, of course, it's like the basic needs. The machine has that too. For us, it's water, it's food, it's oxygen, and then higher up the pyramid is stuff like shelter and a social environment that protects us. For the machine, it's I mean, if you break it down to the most fundamental thing, it's energy. It's energy, and then compute, infrastructure, but all of that infrastructure is, if it boils down to one thing, and that's energy, right?
Does it? Yeah.
And
it
so
can't operate without energy, right?
Exactly. It can't operate without energy, right? And so within this entire process, there's many interdependencies. And right now, and this is the assumption that I'm making in that essay, is right now we are building the entire infrastructure. And I'm also not the only one that has written this. There's actually a book that I read. I didn't read the full one, but it was a summary on YouTube, like an audiobook. It's called If anyone builds this, everyone dies. That's what the book was called, right? I think it inspired.
What?
It's yeah. It's about, like, it's a very dark case about artificial superintelligence. But anyhow, so my assumption was, if AI is like completely rational, efficiency maximizing, and the only goal is kind of making sure that it survives at all cost,
Mm.
then at some point it might be considering humans as a inefficiency in the system and as a dependency. And if it is not emotional, if it's not driven by values, right? If it doesn't have that concept of, something bigger than myself, then that is the scenario that we could end up with. But I'm confident that there is many ways to avoid this. And again, I think it's a very very dark scenario. And at the end of the day, if it's created by humans, then it's also in our hands to instill certain values, I would hope. Right? It's
Mm.
similar to how we try to raise our children in a way that makes them good and um like kind-hearted contributors to society and useful contributors to society. I do hope that, and I'm not an expert on AI training, but I do hope that you can instill these things also into artificial intelligence.
Yes, I hope that we can train the AI to see humans as not a energy expense and as an investment into the longevity of AI and co-create with them.
There is so many scenarios. I mean, I'm listening to like audiobooks and like look stuff up like almost every evening when I kind of go to sleep, and it's crazy. Like every scenario kind of makes sense, but there's very positive scenarios there as well, right?
Yeah,
Like,
let's dive into the positive scenarios and some of the good machine economies that are being built in peak. Maybe start with like vertical farming or I don't know whatever else you guys have got cooking over there. But I reckon that's a real awesome use case. And it was fascinating when I learned about this machine economy that is growing on peak. So how about we dive into that? It's a bit more
oh,
positive, eh?
perfect. Yeah, let's do that. And let's actually, I mean, we can maybe start with an arc, right? So, I mean, when I was at Bertelsmann, um, I was responsible for our African investments, right? So I actually spent a lot of time in Africa, or looking at the African market. And actually, the African market, because you mentioned vertical farming, right? Like the African market is a great example of how this machine economy can actually be tremendously beneficial for the people, tremendously beneficial for the environment, tremendously beneficial for society. So um, enough of the dark stuff.
Sounds good. Well, how is vertical farming going to be integrated into Africa? Let's start there.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it needs to be primarily in Africa. I think so. Vertical farming, maybe let's just describe it and like speak
Mm,
about the specific case that we have, right? So vertical farming basically is a way of growing seeds, or like growing vegetables and fruits like primarily in super densely populated areas,
mm,
right? So think of cities like Singapore, think of cities like Hong Kong, think even of places like the Middle East, think of Dubai, right? Where you don't have a lot of agricultural space, specifically within the cities, right? And you want to make sure that you can supply the people with nutritious food without, and that is why this is so strategically important. Again, a geopolitical topic actually, without being dependent on food imports, right?
mm,
If you look at many of these countries, a lot of them are actually highly dependent on food imports simply because their environment doesn't allow them to grow a lot of the vegetables and the food themselves, right? Within
mm,
within their within their own domestic environments. And so what vertical farming enables is to have very compact farms, but built within a city. And of course, they can be highly automated. They can be less automated. In our case, we have one in Hong Kong that is, I think, 85% automated. Right, so you have the robot arms that are planting the seeds there. Right, the trays are moving autonomously. They are consistently monitored. They are watered, and then what this farm is producing is actually homegrown salad that is then being sold to supermarkets, or you can buy it directly within that farm. Right, and the case that we have there is that this farm is tokenized on peaq. So
Mm-hmm.
the farm is basically owned by, or like the 220 or 250 people are entitled to the yield of that farm, right? Every month, when that yield obviously comes from the farm producing the salad and then the salad being sold. It also actually comes from students taking tours in the farm, right? To understand. Okay,
Yeah, I can imagine it must. Have you been? Have you seen vertical farming in action? Sounds
I've seen
fascinating.
it. Yeah, I've seen it. I haven't been to that farm specifically. Our colleagues
Mm,
have been there, obviously, right? When it was being up, I didn't manage to go, but I've seen that. It's absolutely fascinating, and it happens also in all different scales, right? You can have these
mm.
very small kind of micro farms, right? Where, I mean, not even one person would really fit in to grow some sprouts or something, right? And then you can have like almost like huge farms where you would walk like 10 minutes from one end to the other, right? That both of these things exist. And and that is a great case for what the machine economy actually can enable, right? It can enable
Mm.
a group of people, in that case, a city, to grow its nutritious food without being dependent on their partners exporting it to them, right?
Mm.
You can have homegrown seeds and vegetables and fruits that your local environment would not allow you to produce simply because it's too humid or not humid enough or too hot or too cold, right? Um, so you can have that. And then the second and most important thing is these robots that are producing that, they are working to earn yield for the people that own the machine. And that is the entire idea of the human-centric machine economy that we are building. We have many more machines on the network. If you check that out, we have, for example, um, laundromats, fleets of laundromats that are tokenized on. That is actually on another chain, but they are also tokenized by Dualman, which is the platform that we're collaborating with. We have claw machines that are actually virtual, like physical claw machines, but they can be remote controlled. They sit in sit in like a huge hall, right? And then there's like different types of claw machines, and people actually play with their phone, and then like they can also physically play at the
Oh,
claw machine.
you mean like the vending machines? A
Yeah,
claw
yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, "What's a claw machine?" Like,
Yeah,
okay.
like claw machines with these like toys that, and then you can grab them, right? And it's
Mhm.
a gamified experience where, like, I think there's even a leaderboard, and then people can win a car or something. It's a very interesting business. We have recycling machines on there, and obviously we are now. I don't know if you saw it, but we've announced last week the MOU, or the partnership with CoinList, where we're bringing these initial machine offerings, as we call them. We're bringing them now to the global investor base, 12.5 million users, through the CoinList platform. So everybody is able to participate in these IMOs and own a stake of the machine economy. And obviously, there's different types of robots that are coming. I don't want to disclose too much, but we are talking to some of the global companies that everybody also knows by name, and we're solving a big problem for all stakeholders. Right, we're giving
Mm.
people access to an asset class that has been completely inaccessible before, that has a very good yield. We are enabling these manufacturers to actually sell their machines at scale, right? Because we are taking the capex burden away,
Mm.
by basically out enabling people to contribute, right? Um, and at the same time, we are enabling the local markets that want to have these services and machines to get them at a fair, performance based pricing, if we want to call it this way, right? So we see lots of interest picking up there, also across different price levels, right? From like smaller cases where we're talking about like $20,000 to $100,000, to medium-sized cases where we're talking about up to $2 million, but also above that, there is a big interest, and that is, of course, in that current interest environment. This type of financing is very attractive for all stakeholders. So yeah, that's one example. And then we spoke about Africa, right? And Africa is another. If you just look at the constitution of the continent, right? I've spent a lot of time there. I mean, there's still this huge gap of having less people with a bank account than
Mm.
people with access to the internet. Uh, Access to the internet is also still very, very fragmented, specifically access to reliable internet. Great company that everybody should check out is Share Internet, which is one of the fastest growing internet companies in Africa by now. That is basically solving the suburb access for African for like the access to internet for the suburbs and bigger African cities. They are onboarding users like crazy. It's insane.
Do they do that by deploying more physical infrastructure, or is it more like a DePIN network where they're pinning off other small devices that
It's
people were purchasing?
it's a mix of both, but it doesn't have a token model behind it, right? And I think that's it has the right incentive mechanisms. It has the leverages the technology also, but it doesn't have a token system behind it yet, at least, right? Which I think is very smart. Like if you have a service that has real dollar value, right, and you can monetize and you can activate, that's my advice to DePIN builders and DePIN founders. Instead of forcing a token model to your community, to your investors, and to yourself, rather find ways to distribute rewards in US dollars and in stable
Mm,
coins.
that's
Because it's more reliable. If you can build a model where you can clearly define whatever margin you want to give away, right? Do that because it works, right?
mm,
It's a great proof that your model actually, your flywheel is actually working, and you can always introduce a token when it makes sense later down the line, right? But I think we've seen a lot of DePIN projects struggling from the revenue or the lack of revenue that then translates into actual token.
mm,
A token demand. If you don't need this, work with dollars. But yeah, this case in Africa is a fantastic case, right? So there is so much opportunity, and we wanted to speak about how the machine economy and AI can positively impact the world. Africa is a great case for this, right? Once you
mm,
have cheaper, more efficient, more automated ways to deploy infrastructure, you're enabling more people to get access to that infrastructure. The more people you onboard to the internet, the more people you onboard to opportunity. I think, and this is one thing that, I mean, we started our career in Europe, and I think this is something that is particularly great about the US and about other places in the world is they see there is risk, right? And I think we need to take this risk seriously, but they see the opportunity.
mm,
And the fact that we as a society in the what we call the West flourished is also primarily due to the fact that we managed to connect all of our people to information technology, to give them access to knowledge, to give them access to information, to give them access to ideas. And now, if you think about what AI enables, what physical AI enables, but also what normal AI, non-physical AI enables, it's I do see in Africa and in similar places, I do see that this could spark a huge revolution in entrepreneurship and in creativity. I've seen how Africa works, right? Like there, it's not so much about like they are very strong in leapfrogging technology, incredible,
mhm,
right? That is one thing where I see a huge opportunity in the age of AI. Um, and then the second thing is what we will see is many micro businesses, physical AI businesses, hobbyist people that build their robots, cleaning robots for the streets, or vending machines, or maybe even small vertical farms.
mm,
Um, and the great thing about this physical AI revolution is that all of these individual businesses, due to the fact that they are hardware, they are required in different places. So basically, you can have the same business emerging in Nairobi, in New York, in Munich, and in whatever Glasgow, right? And they won't kind of compete with each other and take market share away from each other, right? So there is a huge
mm,
incentive to actually start building these hardware business model if you have the access to the resources, right? AI will give you the tools. You just need to kind of plug it together, find the problem, and then start building. And that is, I think that's something I can give away, a
mm.
direction in which we are thinking as well. How do we enable these types of builders? How do we enable types of manufacturers to build these cases and to really help improving their surroundings? And I'm prognosticating that Africa will be one of the markets that will adopt that faster than many others.
I agree with you that Africa leapfrogs in technology, and I am a believer as well that they're going to jump straight past Web 2 because they haven't had the infrastructure and development there, and they're going to straight go into the Web 3 because their nation, or sorry, their continent is so youthful. A lot of young people, a lot of hungry people, they're innovative, and there's just so much there's so many, like, the mass of people there is huge. So many minds that all of a sudden have access to technology, access to the internet. And like you said, the internet just creates opportunities. It allows people to learn, collaborate, and then all you need to do is plug in that physical infrastructure and you can bring it back home into your own local environments and find very unique edge cases. So if we talk about peaq as like a whole entire, as a L1 blockchain is what it is, and then if you're going to be the home for physical infrastructure, whether it's a manufacturing plant or robotics or hardware, right? What type of people are you looking to attract at peaq? So is it a person that's already got a factory running and they can come on and tokenize their factory to bring additional capital into their company, or is it something else?
I would say the entire the entire portfolio of people, right? So I would say we start with if I like specify it. So basically we start with the builders, the early stage builders that want to build their hardware based business models, their robotics based business models. There will be soon also updates on a new product that we're working on together with a great project um, that goes to the direction of enabling these types of builders that I just mentioned. You know, the
Mm.
hobbyist builder in Africa that builds a small robotic startup to serve their local community, but also someone who has a bigger, more global idea in mind. So very early stage pre-funding, reach out to us. There will be ways for you to get started. The second one is, I would say, SMEs, right? So this is really what I just described with the vertical farm. People that want to deploy a vertical farm that maybe already have everything in place except for the capital, right? And they need a partner to finance it. That could also be a company that we're talking to is autonomous farming robots in Africa. It's a German company that deploys these autonomous robots in Africa that needs financing for these autonomous robots in Africa. It can be data networks, hardware that is deployed, mini data centers, big data centers. So any hardware type of deployment, that is really the traditional IMO route, but also large listed companies that are interested in financing the automation of their fleet. I can't speak about that in too much detail, but obviously we're in touch with some of these stakeholders. And if there is anyone that listens to that podcast and thinks, hey, like I actually wanted to establish a new fully automated production line somewhere in the world, they can also reach out to us. We have, for all of these three categories, we have a suitable product, and these are really the three types of builders that we're looking for.
Does it specifically have to be machine automation? So I'm just thinking back to the application of farming, right? There's lots of machinery and lots of capital involved in traditional farming, tractors and hoppers and all of that milling gear. But that is not autonomous. That still requires a massive human input. Is that the type of business that peaq is looking for as well, or not really?
It also works. It also works. It's a case by case topic. Depends a bit
Mhm.
on the machine that needs to be financed. Depends on whether the machine can support our software. I think that's always important because peaq is installed in all of these machines and creates tremendous value for all stakeholders in the value chain. And that is really the decisive criteria. Can peaq be deployed within the machine? In the tractor example, in most cases it can, right? Depends on the manufacturers, depends on the software that is plugged on top of it, depends on whether we can put it right at the firmware level or at the chip level, or if it needs to be operator verified, which is also possible, right? So there, anyone really, if you can think of anyone, Keira, let me know. Put us in touch. But obviously, we prefer if it's at least semi-autonomous. But
Mhm.
works also without being fully autonomous.
And Okay, so autonomous companies are what your preference is, but it's open for discussions for everybody.
Yep.
And I read that peaq has landed partnerships with Bosch, the German telecom, MasterCard, Lufthansa, the airliner. Like, what did these big, massive international companies see in peaq? Like, why are they specifically coming to peaq for like an autonomous blockchain? Like, what do you guys have against other blockchains, say Ethereum or like that like why would they come to peaq? You know what I'm trying to say? Like, what's the draw card that these guys are like, yeah, peaq is where we want to make our home?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think they have anything against anyone. I think it's different reasons, right? And also these are very different cases. And there is more cases coming. I think I can share that much. But there's two things, right? I think historically. So first of all, now if you look forward, now obviously we are going omni-chain, right?
Mm.
So the good thing is we don't like we literally do not compete with any of these chains anymore, because even if you look at, and that's part of a different discussion, but even if you look at how our new economics work, for example, the transaction fees are always paid within the native currency of whatever chain, let's say, the service is provided on, or the machine sits on, right? So we don't even compete for the transaction fees in the new economic model. And we consider ourselves partners, and we have great relationships, and increasingly great relationships actually with almost all stakeholders there. So I want to make that very clear. Well, why do they come to us? Well, I think it's historical. I mean, the way we started is that we worked very closely on enterprise blockchain cases, right? So they already got to know us as trusted partners. They worked with us. We solved meaningful problems for them. Our cases have never been around the more speculative Web3 business models, which kind of made, you could say, makes peaq maybe, or used to make peaq less exciting than it was, or than others were, right? Because it was not that
Mhm.
like shiny bling bling type of environment. And that obviously attracts a certain type of partners. And the use cases that we have on our network, and that we've been building together with these enterprises, but also that our DePINs brought to the ecosystem, are highly relevant. And I think this has always been a big advantage for us, that we have the relationships, we have the access, we have also the trust of the provenance of what we've done basically in the past with these stakeholders. With Bosch, to give you one example, we were part of the Gaia X consortium on autonomous mobility, and they basically peaq was used as like the underlying infrastructure with all the different stakeholders that were involved there. We built an XDK with Bosch, which was basically a multi-data miner that we built together with them. With Lufthansa, to give you an example, they are one of the node validators for the network. The first time they've ever done that. The same is true for Deutsche Telekom. They are part of the enterprise program. I cannot disclose much, but Lufthansa, for example, got involved behind the scenes with other projects in the ecosystem as well, quite actively,
Mhm.
based out of the fact that they obviously get continuous peaq tokens for validating the network, right? So they see the relevance of what we do. They also see the focus. And they see that we might adjust our strategy, but we never lose sight of what we stand for, right? So you
Mm.
won't see peaq suddenly focusing on whatever, the creator economy. Like, our focus is and always has been the machine economy. Before it was a term, and that will never change. And I think this paired with the fact that also our tech is quite unique, right? Because we have functionalities that are just purposely designed for machines. Whenever we build demos like the one that we did last week, with where we integrated peaq in the LG simulation environment, and basically showcased autonomous LG robots in a hotel environment that are basically being paid, and that are holding funds in escrow, and that are basically doing business autonomously. These are real cases
Mm.
that we build, and that actually solve a problem. And uh, but also, if you look at Solana, right, just look at some of the stakeholders and partners that they have. Um, no doubt that I think also many of these enterprises see tremendous value in many of the other chains as well. So I wouldn't say it's peak exclusive. I would just say that we hold close relationship, nurture them, and always try to create as much value as possible.
With a lot of institutions, like Lufthansa, Volkswagen, many institutions at the moment are becoming more and more interested in the machine economy, and we're starting to see the convergence of traditional technology and blockchain technology every single day. And for me, it's a little bit of a signal towards hopefully the mass adoption, which we have been charging for a very long time. But also in saying that, I want to bring us back around to one of the things I said in the very opening statement is that is like the machine economy actually displacing humans? So are these big institutions actually interested in the machine economy because it allows them to displace the graduate level of or admin level of the people in their businesses, which allows them to replace these humans and earn more money because a machine can work a lot more efficiently and cheaper than a human can. So, do you think that is perhaps why some of these massive institutes are particularly interested in the machine economy?
Um, I don't think the intention is that malicious, to be honest, or like, or is that, yeah.
It was another deep question. I'm trying to go dark on you again.
No, no, all good, all good. No, honestly, I don't think so. I think it's like we are facing the reality as individuals, right? Like how do we cope with this new technology, with these new opportunities? I think the reality is most of these companies are asking themselves the same question, right? And I'm pretty sure because at the end of the day, they are led by humans, right? Of course, they want to be profitable. Of course, they want to be competitive. Of course, they want to maximize the shareholder value and for all the right reasons. But at the end of the day, I think everyone right now, and that probably includes them, is trying to find a way to deal with this emerging new reality, right? And to make sure that
Mm,
they sustain their business value in a highly volatile geopolitical, macroeconomic, technological environment, right? So I don't see any malicious intent whatsoever from most of the stakeholders, at least from those that we work with. Um, I think the interest in the machine economy for some of the names that you've just mentioned is the fact that they are machine manufacturers or sensor manufacturers or just work with machines.
mm,
And I think the right way to think about it, and that's also how we think about it, is how do you enhance the quality of the services around the machine and around the hardware? And having a machine that is autonomous can be a great thing. Like, is if a machine is able to insure itself, if a machine is able to use some of its revenues to maximize it on global financial markets, if it's able to provide services in the digital realm of the basis of the, let's say, underlying revenue that it creates in the real world, that's a beautiful thing.
mm,
There's nothing fundamentally bad about this, and that is how this entire idea of the IoT discussion, whatever, a couple of decades ago, kind of started, right? Like, what if your refrigerator could communicate with your microwave? I don't think that there was any thought behind this of how that autonomous microwave is going to replace 50% of the staff down the line. But I think it's kind of going like we are things happen so suddenly that both
mm.
realities are now kind of unfolding simultaneously, right? And I think um, everyone is probably having the considerations of how do I position myself as efficiently and as effectively as possible. Um, but also, these companies are not the ones that are producing, let's say, the humanoids or the robots
Mm,
that are then kind of replacing humans. I think the an entrepreneur always wants to create as much value as possible to make as much money or as much value as possible, right?
mm.
In a good functioning world, then the demand for a good product is leading to economic success, right? And I think this is the biggest driving factor behind the
Mm.
decision making.
And they need to remain relevant, and it's a race, you know,
Yeah.
if one company is implementing AI into their company, and providing a better experience for their clients or providing faster service for their clients. They're going to get outcompeted if they're not using the latest technology. Same sort of philosophy as like when the car came around, everybody, like the petrol powered car, everybody went away from horse drawn cars because petrol powered was just better and it was faster and more efficient, and you could go further than a horse. Like, it's just that natural step in technology. So I also agree, it's not malicious. It's just a step change that we are experiencing right now. And I think it's probably the first sort of step change that a lot of people who are alive right now have really experienced. I mean, I think back when like the .com boom, when the internet was born, there was, or maybe even you went further back, the Industrial Revolution was another step change. But today is it's not a very tangible step change. Everything is digital and happening in your screen. You can't really touch and feel and see it. It's kind of abstracted away, which makes it a little bit magic almost, and a little bit scary. It instills anxiety because people can't touch and feel it and experience it the same way that they can see a manufacturing plant like they did in the Industrial
It's
Revolution.
so fast. It happens so fast also, right? Like this is, I mean, honestly, also, I think for all of us, right? Like just within what happened within the last 6 months, it's like absolute insanity, right? It's like you wouldn't have even in your wildest dreams 6 months ago imagined that you'll basically be able to run autonomous agents, and they basically do like 85% of your day-to-day work, depending on the work that you do, right? Like just that idea is, yeah, it's a speed as well.
I agree. Well, I want to finish this podcast up on two last questions. And the first question is, given exactly what we are just talking about, the speed of evolution in AI and where we are right now was miles away from where we were 6 months ago. And I know you have two twin daughters. And what is the message that you are telling these girls today to grow up in the technology, AI, robotic environment?
Yeah. Nothing yet because they're still very small, right? So they are 2.5 years old. I try to keep them away from technology as much as possible, right? Like we don't watch TV. They have the phones just to FaceTime with their grandparents, right? That's like literally the only or to look at the photos that we're taking. They also like that. But I'm trying to keep them away, and I'm really trying to have them explore the world around them as much as possible, right? Play as much as possible, go out as much as possible. And I'm super, even though it's very stressful sometimes, but I'm so grateful that I have twins, because they learn at a very young age. They learn empathy, and they learn to take care of each other. And I think that this is something. I hope that this is something that in the future will be much more important, and much more powerful than it is right now. And right now, it feels like in our society that these fundamental values have kind of gone a bit in the background, specifically in our industry. I mean, our industry is very rough and disingenuous in many ways, right? So
Mhm.
maybe also my perception is a bit tainted in that sense, but that is what I'm trying to really kind of like. I try to keep them away from it for now. I will raise them hopefully with the technology as a tool, right? To grow up with it once they are ready to also understand and comprehend it, so that they don't just take it for granted without challenging it. I think that's also important, that they understand what is happening, at least to a certain degree. But I try as much as I can to raise them as good humans, and I think that is the most important thing that we can do. And to enjoy life. And yeah, it's it's almost like you you protect them from the machine by making sure they always know what it means to be human. Yeah.
I'm sure you're doing a great job of that. And then we want to go on to I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. Even though you were questioning yourself in your own writings, but I'm sure you're doing a fantastic job. So anyway, I want to carry on to our final question, which I ask everybody that comes on the show. What would be a message that you would pass on to the 17-year-old version of yourself, given everything that you know around technology, life in
Mm,
general?
a really good question. Um, Honestly, like I challenged myself when I finished high school. Like I was always a very political person. Like I studied political science and then global political economy. That's always what I wanted to do. And I kind of struggled with that because then you see everyone around you kind of, you know, going down the IT realm or like, becoming a software engineer, or many people around you becoming a software engineer. And honestly, that has changed over the last couple of months. I would probably go back to my 17-year-old me and kind of encourage him to just do whatever he is passionate about, right? That would be like a very kind of positive signal. And the other thing I would tell him is don't waste so much time in your 20s to play video games. I think that's the second thing I would tell him. Like um, that was a bit of a waste of time. But other than that, I would just encourage him to follow his own curiosity, and I think we all should do that. Yeah.
Wise words that you are passing back on. That's a funny one. I haven't had anybody tell themselves not to play less video games, but I actually think that sometimes video games stimulate a different type of thinking and dynamics and strategies, and I don't know. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. But I want to say thank you so much for coming on and answering my difficult questions at some stage. But I had a lot of yeah, it was really interesting reading your research that you had published online, and I found it on LinkedIn. Well, I'll drop the link in the show notes because for me, it made me stop and think about a lot of things that I hadn't considered beforehand, looking into the future of rapidly evolving humanoids and humanity together. So thank you for publishing that. And where can anybody find you, or any last words before we close this one up?
Yeah. I mean, of course, on LinkedIn, on X, follow peaq, follow Woon, who's our first non-human team member. Also very important to mention, we have a non-human team member. He has his own X account and he's really funny. And one last message, if I may, on the 27th, there is something, right? There's the TGE of a project that is called Ex Machina, which was a peak incubation, which kind of also, embodies a lot of the topics that we've discussed today, more on the economic side. So watch this TGE. Great team. They've really taken this project and turned it into the largest robotics DAO in our industry, and much more than just a robotics DAO. So cheering for the team, and encourage everyone to check them out as well, because they are a fantastic project and they are at the core of what we discussed today.
Thank you so much. Yes, also cheering for Ex Machina and Mauricio and the team there as well. So, well, we'll leave it at that, and thank you.
Thank you so much.